Okay, thank you all
Now
for,
we're ready to go.
excellent. All right, thank you all for joining me this morning. I'm glad to be here to talk about the secret to being a data-driven enterprise, and I promise we'll get to some specifics about how and why Apache Cassandra is important to doing that. So let's jump right in. So first, I'm gonna tell you what I'm gonna tell you. So to me, a data-driven enterprise is one that uses data and insight to fundamentally change the value proposition they offer to customers. If you're using data and insight for all sorts of other things, for example, if you're using data and insight to reduce your costs so you can offer something at X% cheaper than your competitors, that's great. Keep doing it. However, it's not what I'm talking about when I say data-driven enterprises. Data-driven enterprises specifically challenge themselves, ask the question, how can we make big changes to our value proposition? So I'll share some specific examples of that this morning. Second, the best among the data-driven enterprises are able to catalyze a virtuous cycle or a flywheel in which more customers generate more data. They use that to further enrich products and services, which attracts more customers in a virtuous cycle. That's a competitive advantage that it's very hard to catch up with if that flywheel is spinning. And again, we'll talk about some specific examples and how to spin that up this morning. Finally, to do this, data-driven enterprises have to orchestrate processes, culture, and technology in specific ways to make the most of data's distinctive economics. Digital data as an economic input is different than other types of economic input. And there are some proven patterns for making the most of it. So we'll talk about tools in your toolbox, plays in your playbook that you'll want as a data-driven enterprise. So that's the outline. We'll start with the key concepts. We'll move on to some benchmarks, some market data we've collected from over 1,000 companies just recently to better understand patterns for success to being a data-driven enterprise. And as promised, then we'll talk about the power of Cassandra and how it fits into that playbook. So let's start with the concepts. All right, we all know Netflix. We love Netflix because Netflix knows us. But their value proposition didn't start out that way. Originally, the value proposition of Netflix was about convenience. Even back in the day when they were shipping us DVDs in the mail, they were convenient. Netflix got more convenient when we could start to watch on demand, but they didn't stop there. As more of us watched on demand, they used data and insight to be able to offer us awesome recommendations about what we might want to watch next. It was an evolution, a major evolution of their value proposition, but they didn't stop there. As they collected more data from more of us watching more content on Netflix, they used that insight to start to produce original content that many of us frequently find quite delightful because it's based on what they know about us and what we want to watch. This in itself is a virtuous cycle or a flywheel, and it's a really powerful competitive advantage. I want to read you a statement that they share with investors. With each original, we learn more about what our members want, about how to produce and promote effectively, and about the positive impact of originals on our brand. They went a long way without producing original content. They didn't start until 2013. But imagine trying to start from scratch to compete with Netflix today. You could build a content distribution system. You could apply analytics to what people stream, but you won't have the scale and the ability to deploy original content, to experiment systematically, and feed that flywheel. It's a really smart strategy. So Netflix, of course, iconic FANG company, data-driven enterprise, but is data-driven enterprise for everybody, any Global 2000, any company? Well, let's talk about a non-FANG, non-digital native company. Oh, I should add, sometimes speaking as a guy with long gray hair and a ponytail who would think being a monster slaying hero with magical powers is pretty cool. Sometimes Netflix level of customer insight is a little uncanny. But on to a different data-driven enterprise. So here's a statement from a Global 2000 CEO. We want to get to know you, our customers, better than any company in our space. Sounds like it could come from any company, but it's not a platitude. It's differentiated because this company had a very specific data-driven strategy. I know you can't guess who it is from this quote, but when I put up a quote from their CIO, I think you'll be able to. This is Cody Sanford, CIO of T-Mobile, describing his mission: to ensure we can create meaningful customer-obsessed experiences and products at the speed of our Un-carrier mission. Notice the word Un-carrier. T-Mobile's whole brand has been defined by their data-driven strategy. They're not 3% cheaper than like-for-like competitors. They have a unique differentiated value proposition based on data and insight. So let's take a minute to look at what that looks like. So here's T-Mobile Tuesdays, right? So if you're a T-Mobile customer, on Tuesdays, you get offers selected based on insight into what you're likely to like. This is attractive, obviously, to a user because you're getting offers for free, as it were, but it's attractive to an ecosystem of companies who want to get to you because T-Mobile knows what you're going to like, right? It's a great way to do customer acquisition and marketing based on real insight. And what else does T-Mobile do using data and insight? Well, they offer you Netflix for free. Now think about this. Netflix gets to understand what we like to watch, not just on televisions at home or our PCs, but on our phones. T-Mobile gets to learn more about us based on what we watch in our media behavior. This in itself is a virtuous cycle. It makes Netflix smarter about giving us delightful experience. It makes T-Mobile smarter about getting us delightful offers. It makes it more compelling for all these ecosystem of companies to want to get in on T-Mobile Tuesday. It's a virtuous cycle. There's one thing that I also want to highlight. When I talk about data strategy, think about a virtuous cycle to deliver a delightful customer experience. You can imagine on this slide the customer right in the center. Both Netflix and T-Mobile have skin in the game about making sure our experience gets better and better. If your data strategy is we sell some data to third parties who then have no skin in the game, and it's being used to like deliver banner ads somewhere on the web with tracking us, that's really not a data-driven enterprise strategy, right? You want to have a strategy which has reinforcing effects about making the customer experience better and better, where all the players have skin in the game. That's really important. There's a webinar coming up with my CEO, Chet Kapoor, and T-Mobile CIO, Cody Sanford, soon. I really encourage you to tune into that. So we had some examples about what it looks like to be a data-driven enterprise, to change the value proposition in significant ways that you offer to customers. Now let's look at some market benchmarks for how many companies are going down this journey toward a data-driven enterprise. I say this is also something you can think of as a roadmap, because we can look at patterns for success that are playing out in the market, and you can see what your next best step is to proceed toward a data-driven enterprise. So where does that journey start? Well, here's a CIO we interviewed, and many of you have probably been on a digital transformation journey, right? This CIO's company is doing digital business at scale, but they don't have a data strategy. He was very blunt. I generate a terabyte of data a day, but I don't have anything to do with it. So every month I just throw it away. I delete it. There's no one studying this data, trying to turn it into significant value. They don't have a data strategy. They have a data policy. They control the cost and risk of storing data, right? So they're generating data, but they haven't invested in how we turn this data into value. So square one or square zero, what does it take to start to turn that data into significant value? So we talked to CIOs, our customers, experts, and we came up with a list based on what we heard. First, you need a data strategy. And again, a data strategy is going to be premised on challenging yourself to think, how can we make real significant changes to the value proposition we offer customers? It's not just about incremental improvements, for example. Second, you need a chief data officer. It doesn't have to be someone with the title CDO. It could be your CIO, but it needs to be a senior executive who makes sure you're not just advancing the strategy and asking hard questions, but all the things you need to do orchestrating other parts of the business also fall in line to support it. You need to be using or learning to use AI and ML to deliver these enhanced value propositions to your customers. You can be on a journey, and we'll show you some data about how some companies are using AI in production at scale. But it's okay if you're not there yet, but you need to at least be investing in increasing those skills. And you need to be starting to deploy AI ops to optimize your infrastructure and reduce toil so people can focus on creating value rather than maintenance and operations. And finally, table stakes. You need to have data portability and data scalability. Again, if you're trying to fundamentally change the value prop you offer to your customers, you have to be able to operate at scale. You have to have many teams and people across your company or across your partner ecosystem have access to the data. So we have this checklist. We had a scale about how well you're doing on each of these items. And then we went out and we surveyed 1,400 technical practitioners, managers, and executives, and we asked them to describe where their company was at. So let's look at how this data plays out. Here's a picture of how companies are distributed on their data-driven enterprise journey. Each bar is the percentage of respondents and how they describe their company. And we just scored them based on their responses. You can see there's about 1 in 12 who haven't even started, right? They're like the CIO we interviewed who's collecting data maybe, but then just purging it. There isn't a strategy. There isn't anyone assigned to look at it and apply AI or ML. At the other end, there are folks who are well down the road. The top 10% we've broken into 2 buckets. The data-driven enterprise leaders, and then a subset we call the AI leaders who are really using AI in production at high scale right now. But the key takeaway for me is how many companies have made progress down this journey, right? A full quarter of companies are pretty mature as data-driven enterprises. So that has implications for how we think about competition and ecosystem and potential partnerships, which we'll talk about in a minute. But we also saw patterns. When we divide companies based on how they're moving down this data-driven enterprise journey, we also see some correlations with different technologies and practices. So let's dig into that. First, hybrid cloud. As companies mature as data-driven enterprise, they overwhelmingly adopt a hybrid cloud strategy, a hybrid cloud architecture. That's one. Second, cloud native application development. This is the percent of companies who say they mostly are developing cloud native applications. And again, you see a 10x increase between the folks who haven't started down their data-driven journey and the AI leaders. And finally, they're using Kubernetes to build those cloud native applications, right? You see the strong correlation between progress toward being a data-driven enterprise, Kubernetes, building cloud native applications, and doing it in a hybrid cloud way. Now, think about that for a second. That means you're getting horizontal scalability, you're getting compute on demand, you're getting a lot of agility to build and deploy services. Okay, now let's take a look at Apache Cassandra. I think you know what the slope of the lines are going to be. Strong correlation between being a data-driven enterprise and using Cassandra currently, from 0 in the folks who haven't even started on that journey to nearly a third of the leaders. But I think the most important point that I want to focus on is those who said they were highly likely to either expand their use of Apache Cassandra or start using it if they weren't. Again, we get up to 2/3 of the mature and leading companies and 8 out of 10 of the AI leaders. That's because, to start from the extreme, AI in particular gets smarter and smarter the more data that you have. So clearly Cassandra is an awesome fit for an AI-focused company. But if you think about building cloud native applications, using Kubernetes, having a hybrid cloud strategy, you have compute on demand. You have horizontal scalability. So there's a wonderful fit between Apache Cassandra and that cloud native paradigm. You can scale on demand. You have horizontal scale. So that we see this pattern of the 2 things moving together as companies move down this data-driven enterprise path. Technology, strategy. This, again, is the flywheel. As you're able to deploy cloud native applications faster, to scale them on demand, you're more able to have your teams, your chief data officer, your strategist, thinking about how we could deploy AI and ML to be focused on creating value rather than maintenance and optimization because you're using AI ops. And you're able to have more people and teams working on it because your data is portable and scalable. So this is a virtuous cycle of being able to deliver great experiences at speed, use data and insight to make them better, rinse and repeat. Just like T-Mobile CIO Cody Sanford said, my job is to be able to deliver great experiences at speed. So as you do this, it's not just that you're using Cassandra, it's you're finding more Cassandra-shaped opportunities. So now the secret part. That probably all sounds logical and makes sense, but there's something really important to get your head around that will change how we think about orchestrating processes and tools and what our priorities are as technologists and strategists in any company if you want to be a data-driven enterprise. So you've probably seen this, right? Data is the new oil. That was another Economist headline. Data is the world's most valuable resource. Data creates new rules for competition. But what are those rules and why? Well, this is the other two references to economics I'll make in this presentation. Really important thing to grasp. Data is non-rival. That means it's not used up when we eat something or burn some oil or have some consulting time with our accountant. That time is used up. That oil's gone. Data is not like that. Any number of people or firms can use data simultaneously. They don't diminish it, right? Any number of algorithms can be applied to data simultaneously without reducing its availability or value to anybody else. That is fundamentally different than almost all of the economic inputs we have to create value, right? More data makes other data more valuable. Having other people in our ecosystem or our company try and create value with that data doesn't stop us, right? It's like a lab with infinite seats, right? Even physical R&D was constrained. So this, again, brings us back to our friend, the flywheel. Data is actually a triple flywheel. 3 ways. First, more data makes you smarter. More data makes AI smarter. So just thinking about your own product or service, getting more data is a virtuous cycle that makes having that data more valuable to deliver customer experiences. But because data can be reused and shared and recombined, every new piece of data makes every other new piece of data just a little bit more valuable. There's a greater likelihood that somehow, somewhere, whether that's within your team, within your company, within an ecosystem, that data could be mashed up with other data to create a valuable customer experience, to change a value proposition. And finally, the really big wheel that's turning the whole economy is, remember, 8 out of 10 companies are making real progress toward being a data-driven enterprise. As they do that, as they change from being like our CIO who just purges his data every month to folks who are keeping data, figuring out how to use it to improve customer experience, figuring out partnerships, figuring out how they could mash other data up with it to be valuable, the whole pool of data and the value and the possibilities increases. So if you're T-Mo, who's your next Netflix? If you're Netflix, who's your next T-Mo? If you're in any industry, who's the next partner that wouldn't have existed in a world that's less data rich, right? We're in a world where others may want to provide a service or a product to your customers because the data they get back is valuable. Maybe they do it for free. You might want to provide a product or service to another company's customers because the data you get back is so valuable. That's why it's so important to have that top line data strategy and executive sponsorship for saying, yeah, we see the way the world is going to look like, and we want to be there, and we want to play like a T-Mo or a Netflix. So if this is so awesome, what could possibly go wrong? Why isn't every company a data-driven enterprise leader? Well, there are some hurdles in the way. As Mary D said, I've been working on helping companies adapt and change for more than 2 decades now. And this quote really cuts to the heart of some of the challenges that affect particularly enterprises and when it comes to technology. This is another CIO we interviewed. He said, look, we use Cassandra for this particular project because the architect knew it. The architect went to bat for Cassandra. Otherwise, to be honest with you, as the CIO, I say, this is a quote, whatever guys, just get this thing done. I just need to make sure the functionality works. Well, imagine a thing is a product or a service or a website, an application, right? What does it mean to say the functionality works? Well, we have to have some empathy and pragmatism for how corporate decisions are made. So imagine a company wants to make progress toward being a data-driven enterprise, but they think about what are goals? What feels achievable? And so maybe they set a goal that's not super bold. And legacy and inertia, and even just, the real forces of business, if you're in that conversation, you want to say, maybe we should aim higher. It's like, well, whose budget is that going to come out of? Who's going to sign up for the extra risk? Can we do our traditional net present value analysis and feel like certain things are going to turn out that way? Maybe not. And so then a project team, a technology team, gets essentially a set of requirements for this application or this service. And there may not even be any kind of mechanism to go back and say, hey, we could do better. Let's aim higher. And even if there is that kind of mechanism, again, like, do you have to go ask for more funding? Do you have to sign up for risk where now you're accountable if things don't turn out as planned? There's a whole set of forces that kind of tend to constrain aiming big and bold, which were fit for purpose in a less data-rich world, in a world with fewer data-driven enterprises. But as it's a more data-rich world with more data-driven enterprises, you're actually missing out on opportunities on balance. So I'd like to offer a frame and some tools for kind of thinking about this. So again, he said, just make this thing work. So if you want to think about a thing as an application or a website or a service, I want to offer a little metaphor here. This is a thing. This is a yellow bar. It's a perfectly fine yellow bar doing a perfectly fine job in this context. This thing is also a yellow bar. It's doing an awesome job in a very different context. The context matters. When we say a thing like a yellow bar, it's like, well, what's the context for it being awesome? These are two very different contexts. Again, when we think of a product or a service, what's the context for it being awesome? A data poor world with relatively few potential opportunities to be part of an ecosystem and get big and change customer value propositions, or a world in which there's a lot of data and a lot of emerging and new opportunities we can't even clearly see yet, but we know they're coming, ways to use data to enhance the value proposition we offer customers. So I want to break this down into some simple cognitive tools. When we think about a product, a service, an application, a website, we have some sense, right, in the plan, how valuable would that app or service's data be? Okay. If we're aiming high, if we think it's going to be very valuable, right, that's one frame of reference. Then, if we think that value is going to be high, and we think about how powerful does the data layer or the database need to be, I'm going to say, if you're like the many, many practitioners and executives I've talked to, there's a zone of high value, high power where the answer is obviously we should be using Apache Cassandra. What stands in the way of more use of Apache Cassandra? Well, aiming low. We have some sense we're going to set our goals for this application or service, and we think the data will be somewhat valuable, but we don't see a way. We're not even going to aim for fundamentally changing the value proposition we offer to customers. Right? That's aiming low. That's constraining ourselves. There's also, and this is my favorite one, maybe in 3 to 5 years, the data associated with this app or service will be really valuable. Maybe in 3 years, we'll fundamentally change the value proposition we offer to customers. We'll kind of wrestle with that down the road. Not irrational, but in the context where it's just more and more data, more and more opportunities to use data on your own, across your company, or with an ecosystem to really make a big impact. I want to offer a different way to think about things, right? Think about an app or service that could potentially fundamentally change your business or change your business in a material way. Maybe you don't have an obvious clear path to that today, but think about scenarios in which it might. Think about the possibility that could become a business on its own, something that is a standalone offer, or again, something federated with an ecosystem. Think about the fact that it might become the business, right? That it actually might carry the business under certain scenarios, or have such success that it becomes a line of business on its own or spin out. That won't be true for every application, service, website, what have you. But we're in a world where there's much more potential for digital data to have that level of value. Now, I want to close by bringing it home to a real world significant example. That's a data-driven enterprise, data strategy, and Apache Cassandra success story. Here's a retail CFO from not very long ago, just a few years. When customers went on our website and then came into a store, they wanted us to know them through that whole journey. The CFO and her company really leaned into that in a significant way. And let's look at the implications. What happened? Okay, it's Target. They understood the power of data, the value of data and insight to their customers, and really leaned in hard to doing that well, to having the capacity to deliver not just a great experience, but a great experience at scale. So the upshot, in this time of crisis, who could have foreseen, besides epidemiologists, but for most of us, we were shocked. Their capacity to scale is carrying the company. Digital sales up 282% in April. They chose not just to be good at data and insights, but also to build in a cloud-native, scalable way to use Apache Cassandra to aim high and be able to triple their capacity. That's a real amazing impact, because it's not just about the bottom line. It's about jobs. It's about Target being able to pay employees who are vulnerable to stay home until we're through this crisis. That's a testament not just to the technologists and the CFO and the executives who committed to a data strategy. It's also a testament to the power of Apache Cassandra. It really is a technology with the power to change the world, to be deployed in world-changing applications and scenarios. I'm super excited to be a part of helping people tap that power, and I look forward to learning, not just answering your questions, but learning how folks are using its power today. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Bryan. That was great. I've got sort of two questions going on here. One, we have an attendee who wants more information on Cassandra. And then the other question is sort of related, which is you talked all about Apache Cassandra, which does make sense since that was the title of your talk. And well, yeah. And I guess the other question is, how does that actually relate to DataStax Enterprise? So what's the relationship there? And can you say a little bit more about Cassandra while you're bringing the DataStax piece into it?
Yeah, that's a great question, and they actually kind of dovetail well together. So Apache Cassandra, you can think about, I think about it as an open source database that was really, reflects like the best of the internet and the power of internet scale data storage and retrieval, right? So it is massively horizontally scalable. It is super fast. It is amazingly resilient. Bulletproof is a word that people use a lot when talking about Apache Cassandra. And it came out of scenarios like Netflix bookmarking, where everyone, every moment is at in their movies worldwide, right? So it's been open source for quite a while. And DataStax as a company, our mission is to make the power of Apache Cassandra accessible and available to everybody. So that comes in some different flavors, right? One flavor is supporting open source Cassandra. So we offer what we call Luna, which is open source Cassandra support. Another is Astra, which is Cassandra as a fully managed cloud service offered by DataStax. So that removes some of the management toil and effort right? So you can use Apache Cassandra without the overhead and operational work. And then another is DataStax Enterprise, which is an enterprise grade, fully supported version of Apache Cassandra or data system built on Apache Cassandra with open source at the core. And we really believe strongly that Apache Cassandra's superpowers should be available to everybody in the way that makes sense. Like, we have customers and expect companies to be using open source Cassandra, to be using Astra, to be using DataStax Enterprise in the cloud, on premise, with, for example, the highest performance you're going to get is DataStax Enterprise on bare metal in your data center. If that's fit for purpose, that's what we want you to have. But if you can use Astra, a fully managed cloud service, and not have to manage a database, we want you to have that too. So that's how we think about it.
Okay, all right. We have another question that actually relates in here, which is, what about another NoSQL database such as MongoDB? Would that be another replacement for Cassandra?
I wouldn't say replacement. I would say think about what you aspire to do, what the horizon for your product service application is, and you have two questions to answer, right? One is traditional SQL and one is NoSQL. And then one is Mongo fit for purpose for you, or do you want Apache Cassandra? And I'm biased because I think Apache Cassandra has superpowers, and I want the superpowers. So that's how I would approach it. But
given what's been going on worldwide with the pandemic, how have you seen your customers pivot and relate to customer behavior? Because honestly, customer behavior changed drastically overnight.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm an ex-Microsoftie, and I saw Satya Nadella, the current CEO, say they've seen 2 years of digital transformation in 2 months on their earnings call this quarter. We're seeing something similar. For good reason, there's a lot of inertia, particularly in large companies, right? You're balancing the business as it was with the business as we think it'll be in the future. And for most companies, the future, you work with kind of a 3-year time frame, so you kind of work incrementally. And what coronavirus has imposed a new future on us, right? And if you think about e-commerce and retail, if you talk to retailers, they would say, like, yes, e-commerce will be bigger in the future, and we've got a trend line. And so we think about digital services and the scale of e-commerce and how well we understand our customers, and we're working on it. But now it's like, hey, 3 years from now is here, and it's probably going to stick. Behaviors like e-commerce and delivery and all that. And so what we're seeing is customers, particularly the customers who are advanced on that journey, figure out how to take non-strategic technology and just get it through SaaS, right? Like, what can we not build or manage ourselves in order to invest in the stuff that actually changes the value proposition, that delivers data insights at scale?
I think it's difficult for the customer to sometimes understand what a company is doing. I think sometimes they get a mixed message. And are you seeing this as well? And what do companies do about that?
Yeah, I think, there is actually, this is another Microsoft executive who said it really well. Their relationship to their customers, this resonated with me because it's what we try to do with our customers. There's an immediate pivot as this crisis hit to ask, how can we help? And I think that's exactly right? That's the relationship with our customers. But I think it's also the relationship companies should want with, like, their customers, right? How can we help? And that ranges from, how can we offer a safe environment? How can we, whatever it is. I mean, the financial services sector has stepped up with different forms of relief and deferment, right, from banks on different payments and stuff. So I think if you're in some sectors, it can feel pretty obvious. How can we help, right? In others, it can be less obvious. But I think, having just a tiger team to say, like, how can we orient ourselves to help and come across as part of, like, the solution and a way forward, I would say that is a powerful thing for companies to do.
Yeah, Yeah, indeed. So if you had a final word of wisdom for our attendees here, what would that be? What charge would you send them forward with?
Yeah, I think so. I mentioned, I believe in the superpowers of Apache Cassandra. And if you're not familiar with how resilient and scalable and fast it is, like dig into it. It's an amazing piece of technology. But as we think about the current crisis, we will get through it, but it's going to be hard. The economic impact has been rough. But if we think about before the crisis, I worked at Autodesk for a while. 30% of the construction industry is waste. Right? I know from other reading, 30% of the food grown in the world is waste, is never eaten. They're just like, when Microsoft went to a 4-day work week in Japan, productivity rose 40%. So it's just like, in the world before this crisis, it didn't feel like a crisis, but we were kind of going along with a lot of waste and a lot of opportunities for technology and data to just drive productivity, to make people's lives better. And so, like, don't shy away from it, right? Like, lean into it. Like, if you're, this is a credit to McKinsey. They said, look, if you're a company that's been struggling with digital transformation, your stock price may not be under your control for this year. So, you know what? Take some hits and invest in the future, because you're going to take some hits anyway. But you can come out of this stronger. So I would, as a technologist, I think I'm biased to be optimistic, but I would say, like, try and feel some of that optimism and think about how we can come back more productive and stronger.
That's wonderful. Thank you for those wonderful words of inspiration and positivity. That is great. And thanks again to Bryan Kirschner and to DataStax for this morning's webinar.